weekend, again, we celebrate the presentation of the Lord in the temple, Mary and Joseph and Jesus, the child Jesus, coming into the temple for the first time, for the rites of purification and so forth that take place were the custom of the Jewish people. And I was thinking, we also begin Mass, obviously, with this very beautiful celebration of our blessing of our candles. And I was thinking, if somebody was here to check out our church for the first time, they might, I'm going to go check out Catholicism. They probably will never come back. They're like, I knew they were a cult. We had candles lit and everything. It was really crazy. But anyway, what's the point of that? I was kind of, why do we do that? Especially maybe even if if you are Catholic, we don't do this every year on Sunday. The February 2nd, obviously doesn't always fall on a Sunday. And so sometimes it's done at a daily Mass. So maybe we haven't seen it for a while. What's going on? Why are we blessing candles? And so on and so forth. And what's the point of us having those lit candles? And I wanted to just, briefly look at candles and their role and why we obviously draw attention to them. Well, first of all, I think it's maybe best to just think a little bit about the fact that when we hear in the gospel today that Christ is referred to as a light to the nations. Christ is often referred to as a light, as the light that's being brought into the world. At our Easter Vigil, we have our Easter candle, our Paschal candle that takes a central role in that Mass. We sing songs to the candle. We sing songs about the candle at our Easter Vigil. And so attention is drawn to the candles there. What's the point of that? Why refer to Christ as a candle or think of him as a candle and a light? And in order to maybe reflect on that just briefly, I actually want to go to our light panel here in our church for just a moment. So this isn't bad because this is actually, the sun's been out for a while. But up until very recently in the history of the world, this was the experience of people at Mass. And there was much more attention. You would see the candles, obviously they drew much more attention than they probably do right now in our world because we have all of the other lights in our church building. But you could imagine last night actually at Mass it was even more dark during Mass. And so the candles took on a much more prominent role. This was the light, obviously, for people throughout much of history. It was either this or the sun. And if you wanted to do anything and you wanted to read, you wanted to go anywhere, you had a candle. If the sun wasn't out and you wanted to see, you lit one of these. And so I think when we see that, it makes a little bit more sense when we start talking about Christ as the light, as a candle, as a light coming into the darkness. Because candles, for most people throughout most of our culture, most of our history of our world, have taken on a much more prominent role than they do right now for us in the world. So in order to not creep anyone out, I'll turn the lights back on. So the point of that, though, again, the reason that we refer to Christ as a light, again, is because it was something that was familiar to people. But there's also a really important aspect of the candle itself that was understood by people to represent Christ and then also ourselves. A candle, in order to give off light, has to burn. It has to give of its body. This candle, all of these candles on this altar, if we left them burning and we came back tonight, in the afternoon or something like that, they would be gone. The metal cap would be down on the top of the metal candle. In fact, it's happened once or twice on accident, my fault, where that happened. The candle got all the way burned out and there we go. The candle's gone. It's dead. And in order to give off the light, the candle eventually is giving of its body, the literal body of the candle is giving of its substance so that the light may be given off. Now, if you blow the light out, the candle doesn't go anywhere and it would sit there for as long as you left it alone. And it wouldn't be doing what a candle was made for. No one would just say, oh, that's a lovely candle that's not lit. You know, it would just be sitting there, not doing what it was made for. Candles were made to burn and give off light. And so in a very real way, then, Christians have always seen a candle as being very emblematic of what it means to live a Christian life. We're called to give off light to the world. We're called to give off light that shatters the darkness, just as Christ did. And so we think of Christ as the first light, but we are meant to be candles as well. We are meant to burn and give of ourselves sacrificially in love, to give up the things that we would want to do with ourselves and with our time and with our energy, and to instead devote them and allow ourselves to be burned and consumed so that we may give off light. If we don't do that, if we don't sacrifice, if we don't love, if we don't give up the things that we want, if we don't offer ourselves to God and we burn, there is no light. But we're also then as well not doing what we were made for and what we know to be what it means to really be human. We're here in order to give off light. We're here in order to imitate the original candle, which is Christ. And we are meant to be a light to the nations, just as Christ was as well. The final thing that I would also like to draw attention to with our holding our candles at the beginning of Mass, what was going on with that? Why do we do that? Well, we've already talked a little bit about candles, but the other thing is, there is a story in the Gospel, a parable about the 10 virgins who were all brought lamps to go meet the bridegroom. And 5 of the virgins don't bring enough to last, and so they end up having to run and get more, but the others are waiting and ready when the bridegroom comes with their lamps lit. And so in a very real way then today we do this at Mass, because Simeon and Anna in the Gospel today were in the temple ready when the Lord came. And as soon as Mary and Joseph walk in the temple, amidst all the other craziness, there were hundreds of people in the temple that day, probably who knows how many, hundreds of other kids brought in for the same thing that Jesus was brought in for. But when they walk in, Simeon and Anna, because they were there, ready, keeping vigil, in prayer, looking for Jesus, they both run up to Mary and Joseph and they're like, this is the kid we've been waiting for. This is the person that I have spent my entire life in this temple praying and waiting for, keeping vigil. Lots of other people in the temple did not come up, did not notice Jesus, did not care, that Jesus was there that day. But Simeon and Anna did, because their lamps were lit, they were ready, and they were looking. So we start out Mass with our candles lit as a sign saying, we are here, we are ready for the bridegroom, and we are waiting for him to meet him in this Mass and always. And so we pray that we may be candles, that we may be people who burn and give of ourselves to be a light to the world, who sacrifice as Christ did. We pray that our lamps may be ready to burn and we may keep vigil, always looking for new opportunities to meet Christ in his temple as well.